Hey guys, what's going on? It's Jordan. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for stopping by. So today we are going to be talking about the Canon RF85mm f2. So let's go ahead and dive into this right now. So currently the price on this brand new is $599. You could probably find them used. I'm actually renting this one from borrowlenses.com, so they ship within all of the United States. I'm not sure if they go outside, but I know on there it said like no exceptions of like Guam or Puerto Rico. So if you're looking to borrow a lens rather than purchase one and maybe you don't like it, go ahead and check them out. I mean, I paid 67 bucks I think for this for an entire week, which isn't really terrible, especially if you're looking to purchase a lens. So it might be another option. So brand new, $599. You could probably find these used for around $450, $500. I didn't really check on eBay or anything, but I would assume people are probably selling them for around that price. So for the construction on this, it is entirely made out of plastic, but it is based on a metal mounting ring, as well as it has no weather sealing. So if you were looking to use this in an outdoor setting, maybe if it started to drizzle or something, it might not possibly be the best thing. I have shot with lenses outside, not necessarily pouring, but non-weather sealed lenses while it was raining a little bit, and I didn't really have any issues. But just keep in mind that it does not have any weather sealing. Now, this does have a 67mm filter thread on there. So if you were looking to adapt filters, just so you know, 67mm. Now, as far as the construction on this too, so the Canon lens control ring up here does have some nice hard stop clicks. It is very audible. The focusing ring on this one is pretty smooth. I wouldn't say it's like absolutely butter, but for the most part, I mean, while you're focusing, it's not bad. So the close focusing distance from the sensor to the subject is 13 3/4 of an inch, which I actually went ahead and busted out a measuring tape and set up my little Lego guy, and I went ahead and basically just kind of measured out from the sensor plane on the camera body to the focusing point on the little Lego guy, and 13 3/4 of an inch is what I came up with. Now, Canon does claim that this lens focuses to 1.14 feet, so I think that's pretty accurate. Manually focusing this lens is smooth, but I don't know if it's maybe the copy of the lens that I actually received. I'm not really 100% sure if this is for every single one of the lenses, but it does take a very, very long time to focus the lens if you are doing manually. Now, needless to say, if you are focusing a lens manually, and let's say you're going from a close subject to a subject that was kind of far away, you probably want the lens to be able to focus fairly quickly but smoothly. This takes a very long time. It is a very, very long focus pull, just so you guys know. So if you are using this as a manual focus lens, if you are focusing manually with this, you are going to have to throw the focusing ring a lot to get it to where you want. So on the side of the lens, you also get a focus switch. There are 3 positions on this lens. So you have a full focus, you have a 0.5 meters to infinity, and then you have 0.35 meters to 0.5 meters. So basically your macro, your semi-macro, and then your full range on the lens. So basically when you have the autofocus on with that lens switch to either one of those, it will focus inside of that little box. Now, if you have the focus switch on the side set to, let's say, a macro, if you have the autofocus switch on there, you will see a little box pop up inside of your EVF, where it is basically kind of grayed out on one side and then kind of open on the other. Well, basically the autofocus system will only work inside of that little open side box. The rest of the gray part is basically going to be kind of like grayed out, so this way the autofocus system won't work inside of that. Now, speaking of the autofocus system itself, it is pretty good actually. So it is pretty snappy in the photography mode if it isn't hunting for its target. Now, there were a few instances where I did have this set up in photography, so basically shooting in manual with the autofocus on, and it does kind of hunt, especially if it's not really locked on to a target. Just so you know, you're basically going to have to kind of baby it. I mean, if you have that focus limiting switch on there, so let's say if you were in 0.5 meters to infinity, you may just want to go ahead and switch that back to full, and maybe the autofocus system will catch up eventually. I can't say that this happens all of the time, but it did happen in quite a few instances of when I had the autofocus system on, switching between two different subjects. Now, obviously I wasn't using a person as a subject, but I was just using trees, what is out in my yard. So just take it as it is. I don't know if this is necessarily going to affect everything as far as what it's going to catch on to, but between switching subjects from a tree to another tree at varying distances, it sometimes did hunt. Now, when it is clearly able to focus, it snaps in and out between subjects with no problem. So just keep that in mind. If you are using this lens primarily for portrait photography, I really don't think that you're going to have an issue with that, unless you have maybe somebody that is walking by or something, let's say, or somebody standing in the background with another light or some sort of a deflector. You may have that issue, but honestly, I think if you are using this primarily for a portrait photography lens, you should not have an issue with autofocus. Now, with video, the autofocus system slows down for a nice style of slow focus pulling, but if you have a subject that is moving quickly, then I'm not sure that that slow autofocus system on this lens is going to be the best. It could be very well lackluster for what you may or may not want to use it for, so just keep that in mind. I actually kind of like it, and the main reason for that is because it kind of reminds me of maybe somebody pulling focus, rather than just a like quick lens going back and forth type of thing. It's kind of cinematic, I guess, if you want to go ahead and put it in that terms. But it definitely kind of creates more of like a dramatic or cinematic style of focus pulling rather than just something that's going to snap in and out. Now, as far as image quality goes, I think that this lens produces a pretty nice looking bokeh. And at an 85mm that has some good background compression when you're distancing your subject from the background. So for a short telephoto lens, I would say that this lens definitely is pretty solid, especially if you're using it primarily for portrait photography. I did also use this a day or two after I got it. I went and did a little bit of street photography, and I'll go ahead and talk about that here in a little bit. Now, I will say that this lens also does have a pincushion distortion, so if you have the in-camera corrections turned off, you will probably definitely notice it. I'm going to go ahead and throw up some examples so you guys can see what I am talking about. But basically, if you load your files into Lightroom should recognize the lens by itself and turn the corrections on for you. So I don't think you'll really necessarily notice it unless you have that turned off in Lightroom. So just keep that in mind. So as far as image quality goes, at f2, there is a pretty heavy vignette with a small bit of softness in the corners, but the center is pretty sharp. And then stopping down to an f2.8, we started to see the corners brighten up as the vignette starts to disappear. And then by f4, the overall image is sharp with no vignette. And by f18, the effects of diffraction start to kick back in where the image overall starts to soften again, all the way up to f29. So f29 is the absolute limit for the aperture on this lens. Now, I will say, and this is going to be kind of one of these weird things that I couldn't replicate in like a real life type of thing. There is definite color fringing between f2 and f2.8, but mostly gone by f3.2, where you will see no more of that green and purple in the image. Weirdly enough, I really tried to recreate color fringing outside while shooting like some sunny roofs and some sidings and some like really white colored stuff. Honestly, I really couldn't recreate the same effect. I don't know, maybe if it's as prevalent in like a controlled setting as it is outside. Not only was I shooting the siding of my house, which was bright white, but I was also shooting the roof of our shed, which is also very bright white. I will say that there is definite color fringing on reflective and hard edges and surfaces, or basically any hard edges on contrasting colors, such as black text on a white page. Now, I did actually take this lens out and do a little street photography with it, so you do get some pretty interesting shots with the 85mm f2 doing street photography. I was actually kind of surprised by some of the results that I did get. There were certain times where I felt a little too close to like buildings when I was trying to do like street photography, so this maybe isn't the best lens for like shooting architecture, unless you're just trying to get like really intimate details on like the top of buildings, or like if you're across the street from something and you're shooting towards a building, you might get some pretty interesting details like that. but just take that into consideration if you're purchasing this lens for just like an all-around use. I would say that you can probably use the 85mm for fun every once in a while to do street photography, but I would say that if you're a main street photographer, you probably aren't going to want to use it a whole lot unless you're just doing like really abstract street photography. I did get some pretty cool shots doing street photography with it though, so just take that into consideration. So my final thoughts for this lens. So for my first time using a true 85mm lens, I would definitely say that this is a portrait photographer's dream. It easily makes your subject stand out from the background, and the f2 aperture is sharp and still produces enough bokeh that should leave anyone pleased. Now, the results may vary. I liked it, so take it as it is. There are other options out there for less, but you don't get autofocus. You also don't get image stabilization or a macro feature that you won't find in many other 85mm at that price or less. Now, I have been looking at like some Rokinon lenses. I would definitely like to try out a Sigma 85 Art. So maybe time will tell. Maybe I'll be able to go ahead and rent a couple of those lenses too. I did actually look on Borrow Lenses. I actually couldn't find any Rokinons on there. So I might have to just snag one and try it out for a week or two and maybe try and resell it if I don't like it. But I have seen some pretty solid images come out of the Rokinon 85mm, even the EF versions, so take it as it is. If you are a Canon EOS R shooter, you might just want to adapt a cheaper like manual focus Rokinon if you don't necessarily want to spend 600 bucks on a 85mm f2 with image stabilization and autofocus, but I mean, it's entirely up to you. So take it as it is. Well, if you guys like this video, go ahead, give it a thumbs up, give it a like. If you didn't like this video, also give it a thumbs up. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit all the buttons. I'm Jordan, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.